Fermented food is high in probiotics. Our gut microbiome is intrinsically tied to our immune system, and fermented food is an affordable way for all to ensure optimum gut health. Yesterday, Nim and I made a sauerkraut, a kimchi and a ginger bug starter. This is the sauerkraut and ginger bug recipe in here, and this is a standard sauerkraut recipe, and traditional sauerkraut is just cabbage and salt. I'm using a red cabbage, and Nim wanted to add in some carrots because that's what Edwina, who is the wise woman in Nim's eyes, used in her recipes. And this is one that Edwina adapted from Nourished Kitchen. But I'm only going to include 1/4 of the carrot amount because the rest is going to be for tea. As I'm making kimchi too, I'm salting them whole initially, and then I'll shred what I want for the sauerkraut afterward. So to start with, you remove any bruised leaves first, and I'm doing the community way. So I'm going to use the core as the weight because not everybody has fermentation weights. So the first step is to strip your cabbage down, separate it all, and cover each of the leaves in salt. And I know it looks like a lot of salt, but it is needed for this process. I then let it sit for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes is done, I then squeeze it all through with my hands, massaging the leaves to release more juice. I could have worked this more, as you will see later on in the video. However, my hands are just not up to it at the minute. They're covered in cuts from when I was sorting the garden the other day. And when you see lots of juice starting to form, you can then start packing your clean jar. And you pack that as tightly as you can. And I'm going to be using a rolling pin to pack that down in there, to get it right in, to make sure that it's all covered in them juices. At the start of the video, you saw me removing the outer leaves of it, and I kept one of the outer leaves as well as the core separate. So what I then do is, the community way is to fold up that top leaf and pack that on top because that helps push everything down, and then you put your core on top of that and that pushes it all in too, and that core will eventually ferment as well. And you can see Nimue getting involved there. She absolutely loves helping me, and I actually find it is really important to get children involved in this, get them in there, get their hands stuck into the kitchen and teach them these ways, because if we can teach them and educate them at a younger age about their health, eating healthily, good nutrition, then hopefully we can produce a healthier, more aware generation. Once I've packed it into my jar, I make sure that it's all entirely covered in fluid. The core itself doesn't have to be covered in fluid, and it will still eventually ferment. However, you will notice that I haven't sealed this completely. I've sealed it and then I've opened it just slightly again, because as it's going to ferment, I don't want it to actually explode on me. That pressure can build up fast, especially if you have a hot kitchen. Now my kitchen is actually quite cold, so it does lengthen the time for me that things take to ferment. But yours may be warm even. And if that's the case, then you'll need to keep an eye on anything you ferment, just to make sure that those gases don't build up and you have a bit of an explosion. It's not as dangerous as it sounds, honestly, but it is something to be aware of, and it really happens. Very rare. But it is something that we have to make note of. This jar will then be left undisturbed for a few weeks until I test it, and once I'm happy with it, it will go in the fridge. And at that point, I can just take it out and use it as needed, or as wanted rather. Now I do try to have some fermented food daily, even if it's just a small amount on the side of my plate, because that keeps that gut microbiome in perfect order and in optimal health. And that is my aim, to repair my gut microbiome. And a lot of our ancestors would have eaten fermented food regularly because it was a wonderful and effective way of storing food long term, and your veg for the winter, so that you can still have them seasonal veg out of season, because back then they lived season to season. And this one is a ginger bug starter, and it is one of the easiest starters to make, and it does take off really easy and fast. Allegedly, as it's actually also my first time making this too, and I first tasted it as a finished product on that food fermentation course that I posted the other day, and it's a fermented ginger ale, and it was the nicest ginger beer I have ever tasted. If you're a ginger beer fan, you need to get on this because it is absolutely amazing. But not only does it taste nice, it's really good for the gut as well. I'm actually keto, but this recipe calls for muscovado sugar, dark or light, and I'm hoping it'll be ready by Yule as a finished ginger ale, which is my next scheduled cheat day, because I find regular cheat days keep me on track, and I have been paleo since 2014, and I find regular cheat days stop me from straying more often. I think I need that focal point. And the fermentation benefits will far outweigh the sugar content. So to start your bug, it is 1 large tablespoon of grated ginger, including the skin, 1 large tablespoon of muscovado sugar, and 100 ml of distilled or spring water. And you give it a mix once you put all that in your jar, and then each day for the next 5 to 7 days, you add 1 tablespoon of ginger, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and 50 ml of water. Give it a stir, shut the lid back over. I'm using a jar with a crappy seal on it, so now it's only used for ferments because it allows that gas to escape safe. Around day 4, you should see bubbles signaling that it's active and ready to use, so you can pop it in the fridge then and feed it once a week, and you can keep the bug going indefinitely using that process. And honestly, this is the nicest ginger beer you will ever taste in your life. It is spectacular. I can't recommend it enough.